Okay, let me preface this video by saying I'm mostly going to stay within my own ballpark here and talk about the social and pop cultural significance surrounding white privilege and the socially racial hierarchy. I will also be talking about race and by extension racism on how it pertains to me. I'm obviously not saying all forms of racism are exactly the same. This is my personal, subjective understanding on this topic. I don't know anything about systematic racism or how that leads to people being marginalized. I don't know if there's a system in place to keep Caucasian people more affluent while keeping minorities from succeeding. I'd like to think there's not, but who knows, maybe there are evil globalists out there who are controlling everything secretly. Jesus Christ, I sound like Alex Jones.
Look, here's the thing.
Fine. Listen,
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
For me personally, I'm of the egalitarian belief that we're all equal and should be treated as such. I'm going to be talking about movies, video games, internet culture, so please don't message me about how I'm part of the secret reptilian conspiracy and how I'm a racist cuck who should kill himself. My mum already tells me that. Well, first off, before we start, funny story about how I stumbled onto this topic. One night I went out and I got pretty absolutely hammered. I stumbled home at 3 AM and I thought, man, I should make a video on white privilege in cinema. I'm sure that's a good idea. So in a drunken stupor, I cobbled together the script and the remnants is what you're watching right now. Anyway, so when I say white privilege in cinema and pop culture, what exactly am I referring to? Privilege from my perspective doesn't mean you have more inherent advantages over another person. Privilege to me is a social coping mechanism that people are inherently born into. Think about it like this. The human experience is inherently a crushing and brutal one. Horrible injustices are constantly happening all around the world. People living in what should be a happy environment are suffering from uncontrollable mental illness. The world as we know it is on literal and metaphorical fire. Not to mention human life has no inherent value, and the only thing as humans living in a society can do is distract ourselves with meaningless tasks like consuming food, alcohol, TV, games, politics, YouTube videos until we slowly succumb to death. So privilege is something that lets you cope with this meaningless world. We are all in a constant state of suffering, and all privilege does is help some people, fucking white people, suffer less, while other people, in quotation marks, who don't have that privilege have to suffer a lot more. This is why no one wants to talk to me. Jesus Christ, I am so fucking depressing. An example that would fall under the white privilege banner of this discussion would be Caucasians have the social privilege of not having to deal with a racial slur, while every other group has to deal with that social imperative. At the end of the day, some racist cuck can come along to me and call me a sneaky kamikaze Jap, and there isn't anything I can say in return that is anywhere near as equally malicious or hurtful with any sort of historical context. Caucasians have the unfair privilege of never having to deal with the reverberations of a situation like this. Before I get into the meat about white privilege afforded by Hollywood, let me give you the examples about privilege that I was inherently born into. I was born as a man, which has its benefits and minor drawbacks. I was born into a relatively nice place in the part of the world where there's not a lot of crime, murder or rape. I was born into a decent family who didn't abuse me physically. I have been surrounded by people who have treated me badly. I'm not physically broken in any way. I do stumble a bit with my mental health from time to time, but that's about it. I didn't exactly win the genetic lottery, but you know, I do pretty good for myself. What I'm getting at here, it could have been significantly worse and significantly better. I could have been born as a woman in some shithole somewhere in Eastern Europe with no family. Alternatively, I could have been Elon Musk's son. Alright, so looking through this framework, let's apply what I've said to cinema and pop culture. So right off the bat, we all unanimously know that Caucasian people, specifically straight Caucasian men, have the monopoly on pop culture through Hollywood. We all know this, I'm not criticizing, I'm not judging, here are just
the facts.
No other entertainment industry can compare to the sheer global cultural impact that Hollywood has had on the world. Even in the modern day where Hollywood is kind of a shell of its former self, it still has a massive seismic impact on the perception of how we view things from all around the world. Trust me, I live in the middle of bumfuck nowhere conservative Australia and we all worship Hollywood here. This is because post 1945, with the proper inception and solidification of cinema as an art form, for almost 100 years straight white Americans have been romanticized and crafted as the ideal aspirations to what we look up to in entertainment. the aspiratorial peaks of femininity and masculinity, the white man and woman. Examples of this would be people like Marilyn Monroe, Elvis, Sean Connery, Burt Reynolds, Jane Manstein, 90% of our current Hollywood celebrities, and like the Avengers lineup. Obviously, I'm not saying this is done deliberately as a calculated or orchestrated master plan to go global. From the start, it's basic business 101 to appeal to the largest core demographic, the overwhelmingly white American population with the highest market with dispensable income, Caucasian men. That is just sweet, sweet capitalism for you, baby. Also, the effect is not mutually exclusive to cinema. Pop culture is a big influencing factor, examples being the Western gaming industry, music industry, and the advertising industry, that all follow this same formula and have the influence on what we perceive as white privilege. So people living in Western society are somewhat conditioned from birth to view whiteness and its association to be good and best to aspire to. And yes, with the advent of social justice movements that have come out in the past decade, this hierarchy is currently trying to be toppled. It's not working, guys. What the fuck are you doing? But more to the point, back on track about the subject of white privilege, Caucasian people have and will continue to get the most flattering depiction in almost every light to do with our perception. Western cinema and by extension pop culture incentivizes us to unconditionally think like this. I want to look like him, I want to be with her. Obviously this isn't and wouldn't be detrimental to Caucasian identity, but non-white people who are socially conditioned from birth in the Western world will inevitably perceive and be drawn into the socially made allure that we have deemed whiteness. There have been some rare instances where this obsession and self-hatred of not being deemed white and wanting to be white has led to tragedy. You know, fucking Michael Jackson as an obvious one. With that said, take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. Most people on the whole can make the distinction a film is a socially constructed fantasy, okay? In short, what I'm saying is Caucasians are privileged at being seen at the top of this socially constructed hierarchy due to the uncontrollable global influences that pop culture has on people's perspectives. Also, keep in mind that Caucasians are the one that created the hierarchy to begin with. Anyway, I could talk more about white privilege at length, but I feel like this video is getting way too long and I've stepped on enough toes for one day. Also, I just can't be bothered. You know how long this takes to edit, man? It's a lot of effort, okay? Shut up. Anyway, my videos are mostly for me to create a dialogue. I'm not really here to push my opinions on the people, just to create a conversation. In short, if you're Caucasian, you don't need to feel bad about yourself for having all these privileges to help you deal with the inherent meaningless world. I mean, you can feel bad a little bit, but like, you know, because that will help my argument out. Whatever. Shut up, I'm an idiot. All I'm hoping for with this video is to refute the argument that there isn't inherent social privileges afforded to Caucasians that aren't afforded to everyone else. Caucasians have the privilege of being seen at the top of the socially constructed hierarchy. They are privileged in the sense that they don't have to deal with a racial slur while everyone else has to. So what I'm saying is, if you get anything away from this video, don't just write off white privilege as just another one of those dumb leftist buzzwords. Obviously, history and a whole bunch of other factors have effect here. It's a very nuanced discussion, delving into like colonialism, history, God, all that bad stuff. It shouldn't be boiled down to, white privilege doesn't exist, white privilege does exist, white people suck. If you disagree with me, tell me what I got wrong. It's a very, very broad topic, so feel free to tell me what you have to say on the topic. And to end this, I reckon Neil Akbar summed it up best.
White guys, you're just white, that's all you need. That's the real white male privilege right there. It's not that you have better job prospects, you've got better blowjob prospects.